Alright, so in this last video about CSS, we're going to take a look at inline style rules. So the way that this is going to work is essentially these are going to be rules that I apply inside of my Java code. So rather than having a separate CSS file, say like this separate color style.css that we had created, I'm instead just going to take one of these rules that I have inside of here and put that into my Java code directly. So I want to directly apply that to a particular control that I'm going to be using it with. So to do this, I'm no longer going to need to be getting the style sheet, since instead of doing this externally, I'm going to do this within the Java code itself. So I'm going to go ahead and comment that out. And then right here, when I've already created my label and my scene, I'll go ahead and start setting up the style. So label. So I want to apply some style to the label, so we'll grab that, and then we'll use the setStyle method. Put a pair of double quotes into that setStyle method, and then here we'll place a string with the rule that we want to use. So to give the first example of this, we can just go ahead and use that rule that I already had from the color style sheet. So we'll do fx text fill, and we'll set that to plum. So if I run this like it is, go ahead and compile this. And then we'll run it. And so then we can see that plum color for this is some text. Suppose that I wanted to use an additional rule in this. Say, in addition to this rule, I want a second one. So we need a semicolon to separate them. And then I'll go ahead and add in a second rule. So say maybe I want to modify the font size to something like 24 pixels. So go ahead and add in that second rule, and then we can go ahead and compile this and run it. And then we can see this modification to the size of the text as well. So you see both of those rules being applied. Okay, so this shows the an example of how to actually implement these inline rules in our code. The last thing I want to make a note about is design issues that come with this. So it's very important to keep in mind that with inline styling rules, there are a couple of issues with using this. This is usually best only if you have one or two rules that you want to apply to your application, or at least to a particular part of your application. So if you have something very short and very simple like this, where you can keep it constrained to just one very concise line, like what I've done here, then this can usually be acceptable. But in most cases, it's better to use a separate CSS file to do this. There are two primary reasons why this is a better approach. The first, as you probably already noticed, when I was running examples of this particular setup for the program, every time that I want to make a change to the CSS, because I'm doing this inside of my Java code, I have to go through the process of recompiling the program over and over again. Whereas if I only need to modify my CSS file, say I make a change inside of this in some way, I don't have to recompile the program, I only have to rerun it. That's one of the issues. The other issue with it is a bit more general, which is that it's usually best practice to try to keep certain tasks sort of separated from one another. So this is usually what's known as a couple of examples would be like separation of concerns, where you have one file that's concerned with one particular kind of task and another file that's concerned with another type of task. You could also think of this in terms of the single responsibility principle, what's known as SRP, where again, basically each file, or in other cases, say each individual method or each individual class, as far as Java is concerned, each one of these individual pieces of your code is concerned with only one task or is only responsible for one thing. So the general idea here is that you want to make sure that your Java program is primarily just concerned with the structure and function of your application, that is to say, the Java code, whereas your CSS file is more concerned with the actual style of the application, that is to say, your CSS code. So in most cases, you typically want to avoid embedding CSS code into your Java program, but there is a bit of an exception as long as it's kept very small and you don't have any intention of adding more later. If you do expect to add more style to it later on, then you should just stick with an external style sheet from the very beginning. Okay, so that's going to wrap up everything that I want to talk about as far as CSS is concerned. For the next set of videos going forward from here, we're going to be talking about a lot of different advanced controls that are available with JavaFX. So we're going to be taking a look at things like radio buttons, checkboxes. We have a couple of videos or sections dedicated to list views. So we'll be looking at things like that as we go forward.